In 1957, police arrested 51-year-old Edward Theodore Gein for the murder of Bernice Worden. After searching his remote Wisconsin farmhouse, a veritable horror show of crimes were uncovered, including shallow graves, disembodied remains, and clothing and furniture made from skin, not the animal kind. As new information came to light, authorities began to look at the circumstances surrounding Gein's childhood as they tried to piece together the motivation behind such extreme and inhuman acts. And what they discovered was perhaps just as horrifying as the crimes themselves. So, today we're putting together a profile as we tell you all about Ed Gein's messed up childhood. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. Then, drop us a line in the comments and let us know what other infamous killers you want the scoop on next. For now, maybe tell the kids to go to the other room. When you're watching Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs, Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or Norman Bates in Psycho, you're actually watching the story of Ed Gein. Since his unbelievably gruesome crimes came to light, there have been documentaries, films, television series, and yes, even a musical, all based on the life of one of America's most notorious serial criminals. Ed Gein was the child of Augusta and George Gein, and the family had a tumultuous relationship, to say the least. His father was an alcoholic, and his mother was a domineering religious fanatic. She and George raised their sons Edward and Henry on a farm in rural Wisconsin, the isolation of which allowed Augusta to shield her sons from outside influence. Growing up, Gein and his brother Henry endured their mother's constant barrage of verbal abuse together and supported each other while navigating the lack of affection shown by both parents. Augusta Gein just didn't seem to like her children all that much and seemed to do everything in her power to ruin their lives. After the deaths of both his father and brother, Gein lived alone with his mother in the farmhouse. After she suffered several strokes, he became her caretaker, which some have theorized was the start of a truly twisted relationship that would directly inspire Norman Bates' obsession with his mother in Psycho. Their relationship was bad for Ed's mental health, as his stunted lack of social relationships caused him to emulate his mother, along with all her quirks, while simultaneously growing to hate and resent her. After he was finally apprehended by police, Gein went through a psychological evaluation where a lot of disturbing information came to light. When asked about his earliest childhood memories, one of the first Gein recalled was falling down the stairs in his family's kitchen. He remembered the feeling of being pushed and how his mother was there to collect him after he crashed down into the cellar. And it seemed obvious to everyone except Gein that she had pushed him down the stairs. Psychologists believe that Ed then transferred this early humiliation into a later quest for power, as his repressed feelings against his mother, whom he referred to as a saint, caused him to primarily target women as the victims of his later crime. Additionally, his mother was devoted to Lutheranism to a fanatical degree. She pushed extreme beliefs onto her sons, emphasizing the sin of sexual relations, which according to her was a constant temptation all around them. As an adult, Ed reportedly only left the family home to work and was never romantically involved with anyone. On the other side of the coin was Ed's father, George Gein, a habitually unemployed alcoholic who would either participate in the abuse Ed and Henry were subjected to or disconnect from it altogether. He had worked a number of jobs, including tanning and carpentry, and in 1909, owned his own small meat and grocery shop. His excessive drinking forced him to sign the shop over to his wife in 1911. She would constantly deride George as a worthless drunk, leading to a tumultuous household where the violent but quiet man would respond to criticism with cold silence. George would pass away in 1940, to which his wife would later remark that he went to hell. Anywhere to get away from her, I guess. Early on in his life, Ed and his family lived in La Crosse, Wisconsin, but by 1914, Ed's mother wanted the family to move away from the immorality of the city and settle down on a 155-acre farm. His father had long ago left all the decision-making up to her, so she sold the family grocery store to raise the money for the massive plot of land. With the deed to the land now firmly in Augusta's hand, the Geins moved into their permanent residence, all but completely isolated from the outside world. In their new home, Augusta Gein took a hard stance on most outside activities. Their move from the big city to a remote farm outside of a small town in Wisconsin allowed Augusta to shelter her boys from the horrors of the outside world. Because of this, the Gein boys experienced an extremely isolated childhood. Aside from chores around the farm, the only other time Ed and his brother were allowed to leave the property was to go to school. This continued up until Ed graduated the 8th grade, when he stopped attending school and worked the farm full-time. Ed's time away from the farm was no picnic either. In his early life, Ed had an abnormal growth over his left eye, which had left him with a lazy eye, and a lesion on his tongue made it difficult for Ed to speak normally. As a result, the children at Rosha Creek Grade School targeted Ed for intense bullying, and any attempts to find comfort at home were met with derision from his mother and physical abuse from his father. His failure to make any real friends, either at home or at school, weighed heavily on young Ed Gein. His mother had beaten into him that everyone was out to corrupt him and doom him to hell, especially girls and women. Because of this, Ed wasn't allowed to have friends. Any attempts he made to develop a friendship with other children would result in his mother calling them sinners and refusing to let him socialize. To make up for this hole in his life, Ed was said to concoct a number of imaginary friends to help him through the loneliness. This escape from reality may have contributed to his antisocial personality. Living on a farm means doing a lot of chores, and Gein was expected to help with the upkeep of the property, including the livestock. At the time he was around 7 years old, Ed snuck into the slaughtering shed, which he had been forbidden from entering. But the morbidly curious Gein witnessed his parents butchering a pig. His parents were covered in the pig's blood, and he watched as his mother gutted the animals. In a later interview with authorities, Gein would admit to disemboweling victims and wrapping the offal in butcher paper, earning him the nickname the Butcher of Plainfield. Psychologists have suggested that his early exposure to an animal slaughter without any context may have influenced his later actions. Ed Gein's mother, Augusta, married her husband George in 1900, and, despite being adamantly against anything relating to sex or sexuality, decided she wanted to be a mother. 2 years later, Augusta gave birth to her first son, Henry, and felt an immediate revulsion to the boy, praying that her next child would be a daughter. Then, Ed came along, and she made no secret of how much of a disappointment he was to her. After his birth in 1906, Augusta decided that if she was going to be cursed with boys, she would ensure they did not grow up to be like their deadbeat alcoholic father. This meant, in particular, making sure that Ed wouldn't grow up to be a lustful, godless alcoholic. And in a way, she succeeded. There's no evidence Gein was an alcoholic. So what do you think? Which of these facts about Ed Gein's childhood was the most shocking? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.